It was real. Scottie Scheffler did really get arrested. Chad, take me back to that morning, because I remember I woke up and my phone was blowing up, and I was like, "Oh, I got to get ready, to talk about this." You're in a different spot where you gotta try to find the inside angle here. What happens when breaking news like that happens? How do you go about for Full Swing?
We were so lucky. We already had cameras in the room. We were following Rory that day, and so one of our field teams was already in the locker room at about 5:30 in the morning that morning. And I remember waking up. It was probably I kind of slept in, so I'm like, all right, it's Thursday. We're through the first day. I'm gonna kind of sleep in. I'll try to get to the course around 10. So I woke up to like my phone, same thing, completely blown up. And thank God we had a crew there already who was there for Rory's, kind of early tee time. And they got to see inside the locker room as all the players found out kind of in real time. And I think everybody had the exact same reaction. I mean, the first reaction is like, this can't be real. And then the second is like who? Like of all the players in the entire world, you would never expect it to be Scottie. And I think what people are going to see in the show is like some real kind of never before seen moments from that arrest. We got all the body cam footage from the city, which I think is like publicly available. We might have had to do like a FOIA request, but seeing it in context, it really just, one, it's like makes you even more impressed with Scottie because he just doesn't.
How about shooting 66 that day?
So 66, I mean, that was impressive. The press conference he did right afterwards, kind of an all-time press conference, just in terms of his honesty and his kind of charisma. But then, like, to not drop that you're the number one player in the world while you're being put in the back of the police car, and just to say, like, I'm all right at golf is kind of an all-time quote. So, yeah, he gets asked it by the cop, like, you ever play with Tiger Woods? Like, that's all the cop cared about was whether, like, is Tiger any good?
Yeah, bro, I won the Masters twice.
Yeah, he's like, I've wanted to, yeah. But he never went there. And actually, it was interesting to me when I first saw the footage in the first cut of that episode. It's like, you can hear his voice shaking. It's the first time you really see, like, that, the cracks that we would all be going through in a moment where you live your life on pro golf, especially a guy like Scottie, everything's kind of within his control. He famously doesn't drink coffee like during tournament weeks, and here's something that's completely out of control. And all he could do was just kind of react to it. And you hear that in his voice in the show, I think, in a way that people will find, kind of relatable. And then to follow that up with 66 and press conference, I mean, just what a legend.
Yeah, it was I've said it before. I'll say it again. It was definitely a net positive for his. I know it was probably pretty traumatic personally, but I'm saying just for his public perception, I think it burnished him in a new way.
Oh, no doubt.
How is this season? You've now had season 1, season 2, big successes. Obviously, you learned things from those. How is this season going to compare to those first two?
I think we consciously wanted to get back to the kind of vibes of season 1. Season 2 was super dramatic. We had the sort of framework agreement announcement on June 6th. We had the Ryder Cup sort of, Zach Johnson captaincy and the, Keegan heartbreak. And I think we learned, one, that the live storyline is just not that interesting to like a general Netflix audience, anymore, especially without a resolution. For us to make a compelling Full Swing episode, you need like beginning, middle, and end to stories. And so to hang like half the season on this thing that like, by the time the show came out 8 months later, still wasn't resolved. I think people were just like, whatever, So what we really wanted to do was get back to the vibes of season 1, which was much more of like a character focus. And we wanted to pick really great characters that, were willing to kind of open up to us and kind of get, there's more home scenes this season. It's kind of like it was in season 1. There's some more humor and heart. There's a couple tearjerker episodes that I think, kind of felt a little bit more like the tone of season 1. And then the thing we took away from season 2 was that like international team golf works great. And we elected to kind of sit out the President's Cup in season 1. But after doing the Ryder Cup, we're like, okay, we got to get back up there. And it ended up being this perfect capstone to the year because it tied up all these like kind of loose storylines. And, even though it's, not quite as competitive as the Ryder Cup, it's still like an emotional, roller coaster for the guys that are in it. And I always say like the hardest part about making Full Swing from like a storytelling perspective is like you can't really do much with like a T5, I've got so many great episodes that we filmed with all these awesome like pro golfers and they, they have an amazing season. They have a couple top 10s in majors and it's like, I can't do anything with that. You either need like a big high or a big low. You kind of need one of both. And so we love about team golf is there's no T3 at the President's Cup. There's either winners and losers. And so you can kind of set up those teams and you're going to get strong emotions from 24 guys, either positive or negative. And it's also predictable drama. Like there's, you know that the captain's picks are going to be dramatic. You know when those are happening. It's like the one time we can actually plan. We've gotten really lucky with, having cameras in the locker room when Scottie was arrested and, a bunch of these other moments. But team golf is one of those ones where we can actually kind of plan for some drama and know it's going to pay out.
You guys released the list of players who are involved. Bryson DeChambeau, one of them, he jumped off the page. What was his level of involvement in the show, and what was the decision? I mean, I guess you kind of had to put him in. He's everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean, the level of involvement was absolutely zero from him.
So what does that mean? So why is he billed as a cast member then?
Well, because we follow, we tell his whole story. So we followed him throughout.
But he didn't sit down.
He did not sit down for an interview. We tried kind of for the entire year, put it in front of him, hoped that he would sit down and sort of tell it in his own words. But his story is so relevant to where golf is right now in general, and this kind of marriage of content culture and, obviously creators and pro golf. And he's sort of the live sort of kind of, he's their horse now to ride on. And so we felt like we couldn't leave him out. And he's also like an amazing foil for Rory in many ways. And obviously that episode sort of culminates in their duel at Pinehurst. And, Rory kind of in every way is his opposite. Rory will sit down for us. He always kind of bears his soul in an interview. I mean, you've talked to Rory. He's one of the better interviews in golf in general. And so to hear kind of Rory's heartbreak through his own, voice is obviously really important. But then also in some ways, I'm kind of, I'm not saying I'm glad that Bryson didn't sit down, but
this is a hell of a spin zone. I'm ready for this one.
Well, I just think he produces so much media that he curates about his image and who he is and his personality that we were able to kind of assemble what I think is like a pretty real portrait of who he is. And I think if he would have sat down, it would have been, he would have just said the same thing that he always says in press conferences. And I think, the way that he puts himself forward with his content that he creates, it's also like this great opposite of Rory, because Rory, it's like you see him on the golf course, maybe you see him pop up in full swing, but he lives a pretty private life. Bryson's kind of the opposite. And so there was no shortage of material to make that episode compelling. And yeah, listen, if Bryson's watching the show, the door's always open. You're welcome to come down, sit down, and we'll do an interview anytime. But I don't think the episode is weaker because of it. But, you can be the judge, and obviously our audience will be the judge of that.
So why isn't it just me as the announcer? Listen, what am I doing wrong? I'm not saying that I want more screen time, but I wouldn't hate it.
I think there's a tracker that's tracking your appearances on the show, like one of these accounts on Twitter or on X now. So I think you do lead the commentary cast for sort of most appearances. So, good work on that front. I'm joking.
I understand why there's more people. You don't need to answer that question. It's going to make me sound like a real asshole. I totally get it. That was a joke.
No, it's okay. Just put me on the spot on your show.
Well, you're my show that you greenlit, so I want to thank you for that because we're having a lot of fun doing this. I
will say this real quick. I don't want to interrupt, but I'm so proud of this show. Honestly, obviously, Full Swing has been amazing. We wouldn't have Pro Shop if it wasn't for Full Swing. But I'm so proud of Dan on Golf. The level of ambition of this. Not to just glaze you in front of your audience, but it is. I just love that this could have been a podcast, and you and Ben were no, we're doing it live. And hats off to the whole team that pulled it off, and obviously we're off to a great start. So I'm happy to be a guest. I'm really kind of upset that you didn't have me on the first episode, but I guess I got to have a giant Netflix show premiering to make an appearance. But maybe we'll do more of those.
I would love more of those. You're jumping in the content game with 2 feet. I saw an announcement this morning. The Vanity Index podcast with Wells Adams. You found a guy more handsome than you, which kudos to you. Over there, Ben, I just did the hot thing. You did. It's hard, man. Tell me about this podcast. What can we expect?
Yeah, so Wells and I have been friends and kind of golf buddies for a long time, and one of the things, he lives this kind of amazing Hollywood life. He was on The Bachelorette. He's sort of known to Bachelor Nation. If you're a hardcore Bachelor fan, he's married to Sarah Hyland. She's a famous, actress, and we're both members of the same club in LA, and we just got to talking about how kind of golf is the ultimate equalizer when it comes to celebrities. You get out there, and we've been lucky to play with a lot of famous people, including you, Dan. To play golf, and there's nothing that exposes you more than being on the golf.
That's where you learn about someone's character.
100%. And so we just between us we're just sharing all these hilarious stories, And if I think if you're a Dan on Golf viewer, you understand what a Vanity Index is, but it's the perfect name for the show. It's basically the opposite of a sandbagger. It's sort of an ego-driven handicap, and nowhere is that more prevalent than in Hollywood. And so we wanted to do a show that really kind of takes that intersection of golf and pop culture and golf and Hollywood really, and bring out a bunch of famous people to tell like golf war stories. The thing that shocks me still to this day is like these super famous people that I had no idea are obsessed with golf. Like I just heard Miles Teller is obsessed with golf. I didn't know that. Glenn Powell I knew plays golf, but Miles Teller apparently obsessed. So we're going to be bringing all these people onto the show, telling stories from being out there. We're going to kind of track who we think maybe has the worst Vanity Index in Hollywood.
Who are you got to give me a contender.
I mean, like you're gonna have to listen to the show. I can't tease it for you, but that's there you go. So you're gonna we're gonna pull no punches on that front. And then we also just like find ourselves in this moment where I did not grow up in Hollywood. I'm my dad was in the Air Force, and this is like a dream come true for me. Which also I find myself like in all these crazy places thanks to golf, and like getting on a private jet after a pro-am with like Chris Pratt and Rob Lowe. Like, how did that ever happen? I never expected that in my life. And all we did was sit and talk about war stories from like the golf course for the whole time. And it's this really great unifier. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it. The other thing is we're going to have the first seven episodes of the Vanity Index podcast are all deep dives on this season of Full Swing. So
okay. So it's like a companion podcast sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like an official companion podcast. I've got our producers coming on. I've got some of the players that were featured. I
must have missed my invite. You want to talk about not being invited on the first episode? I wasn't invited in the first fucking 7.
Hey, we're not done recording all of the first 7, so we still got time. But I think it'll be so if you're a fan of Full Swing, you're going to get stories, basically stuff they wouldn't let us put on Netflix, like really behind the scenes of some of this stuff. And so those will be the first 7 episodes. Then we'll kind of transition into our regular scheduled programming, which is the most famous people that we can think of that also happen to be obsessed with golf and just nerd out together.
Awesome. I can't wait to listen. You're welcome on the show whenever you want. You sign the checks. So if you want me on the if you want on the show, you bang my line. You know where to find me.
Listen, I know who to call. And hey, hat tip to Ben, man. Way to hold it down in that co-host chair.
I think we're going to invite him back.
I think so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chad.
Yeah, happy to be here, Dan. Congrats again on the launch of the show. It's going great.
Thanks. I appreciate it.